Great. Well, thank you for attending this XQ blog. We at XQ are very lucky to be a partner of AWS, and we have a chance to work with Hector Rodriguez, who's their subject matter expert on healthcare. He is truly an industry leader. A lot of people follow his insights. What we'd like to do today is really, get some deep insight from Hector on what's really going on in the healthcare space in terms of the challenges. And then we're going to look at, what can be done in AWS, including some new tools that you may have not heard about or seen about. So with that, Hector, thank you for joining our very humble webinar. And, we'd just love to hear from you. What are you seeing in healthcare? You basically, talk to people every day, all day, across this nation, from the big medical groups to the smaller practices. So would love to get some insight from you, sir. And again, thanks for joining our webinar.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm happy to be here, and it's been a long body of work and experience ever since the HIPAA law was finalized in 1996, and then we started to try and implement it a few years later. I was a middleware developer for healthcare organizations working on those HL7 and X12 interfaces. And when you're in the middle, you see a lot. You see a lot of what's going on at the provider space in the hospitals, with the health plans, with the life sciences organizations and the pharmas. But you also get to start to discern patterns in some of the challenges. And HIPAA itself is a privacy law. It was designed to protect the privacy rights of all of us as healthcare consumers, as patients. And that privacy is about the data. And since the beginning of time, probably data protection has been a challenge, data privacy, but also understanding that the patient is the data, the patient owns the data. This concept of data ownership, who owns the healthcare record, who owns the patient data, has been booted around forever. And I always argue that I'm the patient, it's my data, I own it, and I am the originator of it. Because that's another challenge, is data ownership is temporal, and as it moves from one owner to another, it can be changed. So you may have data integrity issues, you may have consent issues, you just may have just overall viability issues. At some point, the data really does start to lose its value. But I think that with the advent of cloud computing and then solutions like XQ, we've come a long way, and the possible, it just looks incredible today, what we can do with large-scale cloud computing environments such as AWS, and working with infrastructure that are designed to be secure, to be flexible, to enable organizations to innovate. And one of the things at AWS, we have a culture of failing fast. And when you can fail fast, it means you succeed faster. And that's what I love about partners like XQ also. We're constantly finding new partners. We're innovating, but we're focused on not just the technology, but how can we really help the healthcare industry develop and deliver more modern solutions to serve their patients, to serve their community, to really serve their clinicians, right? It comes back to what we call the quadruple aim. How can we improve the patient experience, the caregiver experience? How can we reduce cost of healthcare overall, make it more affordable, more accessible? And then how do we address population health? And we pull all that together and we make that our purpose. It's amazing what we can accomplish.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, that's, really insightful. And your comment actually opens up hundreds of topics and issues. But, I think one thing I actually do want to put you on the hot seat here is, during COVID, we really saw the medical system strain. I'm not an expert in the virus itself, but I think I'm on the technology side. We saw the medical system strain in terms of being able to manage records or manage patient data. Do you think there's any lessons learned out of that event, which hopefully will never happen again, in terms of the maybe the challenges of a traditional data center versus cloud, because we did see the healthcare institutions that had clouds, they could expand where others couldn't. I mean, was there some, and I guess this affected all of us, something that you got out of that I think
Uh,
is worth emphasizing to the healthcare industry?
And the COVID pandemic was quite an experience for all of us, and unfortunately, it will happen again. That's how pandemics work. We are smarter. We had some lessons learned. Some positives did come out of that pandemic. One of them was how quickly we could share information, share
Mhm.
data to develop a new treatment, a new therapy, the vaccination itself. In the life sciences industry, it takes about 10 years and $1 to $2 billion, probably even more today, to develop a new therapy. So the fact that the COVID vaccination itself and other treatments could be developed in such a short amount of time is testament to what the possible looks like when you bring together data, people, researchers, and sharing some interoperability, but also the power of large scale cloud computing. And even creating the registries for patients who were being affected by the virus itself, being able to track and provide more information and insight, because a lot of people argued that a lot of the responses that were being provided by leadership at the federal level were being made up. Well, they weren't. We were lacking data, and as we gathered
Mhm.
more data, the answers became more and more data driven, and we could see how the pandemic itself was evolving and how it was moving across different populations around the world and so on. And then we were challenged with supply chain, for example. There were a few hospitals who did a really good job of optimizing their supply chain and not having the same shortages that a large percentage of these organizations did face. But that again becomes all about having data, having better insight to where materials are, how they're developed, how they're distributed, how you can acquire them, and to make sure that you have that level of insight, both from a supply chain point of view, from the demand side, the supply side, and bring that together all in one place. So we're getting better. I mean, again, the pandemic exposed some real faults in the healthcare ecosystem or lack thereof, not just in the U.S. but around the world. And the good news is we're learning from that.
So I guess the one takeaway I get, I understand your comment that pandemics will happen again, but hopefully the next time we would have learned from the last one, that I think your thought about, you know, being able to share data, I think really does make a difference, because I think the
Yeah.
one thing we all observed is just not people trying to do a good job, but unfortunately there was a political aspect that came into it. And I think that added to the stress. And hearing you speak, I guess the one thing that resonates with me is, if we had more data, it helps all stakeholders. It helps the researchers and policymakers, but it also helps on the political side, so it doesn't become a healthcare catastrophe doesn't turn into a political leadership catastrophe, right? Where everybody can look at the same data. And I guess the thought I have from that is, if we can use clouds like AWS to securely share data and specifically anonymize the actual patient identity, but show their history and how they're reacting to a vaccine, it seems that everybody benefits, including the patient, without any loss of privacy on these kind of very large
Well,
scale events.
well, absolutely. Everybody benefits, and it's not just the individual patient. Now, populations begin with individuals, so it is
Mhm.
important that we keep the individual patient at the center of the work that we're doing. But by collecting data across populations, we're able to treat large scale populations, and we're able to avoid catastrophic uh, levels of morbidity like we saw during COVID, where millions of people were being affected and unfortunately died from throughout the pandemic. I am not a big fan of adding that emotion or that politic. I
Mhm.
don't think anybody really is to these types of conversations. And I always go back and say, the data will tell you the truth.
Mhm.
We just have to be better data listeners, but we also have to be better at marshaling data from its source, from its origins, and making sure that we are working with the best data possible and that we continue to develop that. And that's why, as we talk about this, I always go back and say it's really important that we have that foundation for the fundamental data elements that are required. Again, the pandemic's a great example. When people were getting sick, let's go back to the source. Let's make sure we understand the symptoms that these patients are experiencing. Let's make sure we understand what medications they're taking. If they had adverse events, let's track it at the source and build the record from that, and then infuse that into the research. And I know in math and computer science, we extrapolate data and we extrapolate numbers in order to draw some conclusions. That's okay in some cases, but when when it's something as critical as this, we probably have to just be a lot better at making sure we have better data and we're not making it up, for lack of
Yeah,
a better
yeah.
phrase. Right?
So it sounds like one thing that we can all think about is creating a roadmap for healthcare providers that I guess first moves them into the cloud, then leverages AWS to improve their cost structure and workflow, and then provides them a foundation to do kind of more patient-centric. Because obviously it's a big jump to go from, your legacy system to a next gen system where you can get your record on your phone. I mean, I think a lot of people have the same vision. So, I
Well,
mean,
it's funny that you show your smartphone. A smartphone is nothing more than a portal to the cloud, a bunch of cloud apps. If you're using any of the transportation services, Lyft or Uber or Airbnb, Zoom, we are in the cloud. Email and browsing the internet, that's all cloud computing. So everybody is basically in the cloud. Uh, most people know it, some people don't, and even some organizations. But back to your point, organizations need to fundamentally adopt a more strategic approach to how they're going to modernize and migrate into the world of what's really just modern technology and modern computing. Cloud service providers like AWS have very rich and supportive programs for migration from on-prem into cloud. Here's another reality. Healthcare, in particular healthcare, but across other industries, we live in a hybrid multi-cloud world. We live there today, we're probably going to live there forever. So we have to think about that in the strategy. Now, there is an opportunity to say, this is our main cloud provider, and this is where we're going to do most of our work, but you can't discount others because patients bring their apps, clinicians bring their apps, and you don't know what cloud that app is working on. Now, cloud providers like AWS do a great job with, again, with partners like XQ and others of making sure that we are following the rules. And I mentioned earlier, our cloud is built to be secure. It's also built to be very private and very compliant. We support, I think it's over 100, it's definitely over 100, I think closer to about 140 compliance regimes or attestations. So we're HIPAA ready, we're high trust certified, for example. We do follow the rules of GDPR or whatever local regulatory requirement exists in that region. And we stay on top of that. And we have to in order to make sure this works for the industry.
so at this point, I'd like to invite Tryon, and what we want to do is basically show our audience a few tools in AWS which are available to healthcare providers. These are tools that allow you to do backup of records, very practical stuff, but far more simpler and secure than doing it certainly in a legacy data center. Moreover, we want to basically provide a glimpse of the records which are captured in the system, which not only help with compliance today, but actually create a foundation for new emerging services, such as providing the actual patient a log file of who's accessed their data and where have they accessed it. So kind of truly revolutionary. So, so with
Well,
that, oh,
before you do the demo, Ryan, though, I do want to comment on what you just said, because this is exciting to me. This is what excited me about meeting XQ late last year, and the work that we've been doing and the discussions we've been having over the last year is the fact that, again, let's go back to foundational fundamentals. Let's put the patient back in the middle. Everybody says it, but who's really doing it? And that means, to your point, as a patient, I want to have visibility into how my data is being used. I want to know where it's gone, who's using it, why they're using it. And I want to make sure I have consent and, again, visibility. But also, one of the other things that you mentioned, just backing up healthcare data into the cloud, but making sure that it's immutable, that it's read-only, that it's very protected. In today's world, healthcare is under attack by ransomware attacks or other type of security events or cybersecurity events. And it's really creating large-scale issues in the industry where it's actually become a patient safety issue, and so anybody who can help solve that problem, be part of that solution, is very welcome to the conversation. So with that, Tryon, I will hand it to you. I'm excited to see the video, the demo too. So
awesome, thanks, Hector. Just as I kind of get into it, I'll kind of kick it off with our Vault product. This product can be utilized to encrypt all of your data on site before you essentially store it in the cloud, where data will be stored in encrypted state. In this demonstration, I'll do a demonstration with data going to S3. This data will actually sit fully encrypted in S3. And then again, as Hector was mentioning, one of the key elements of this is all access events are logged and it fully visible. And these can be provided then patient to identify that X doctor has accessed your records at this time. And then the patient can be confident that no bad actors have actually accessed their actual healthcare records. And then I'll kind of bounce into our secure gateway product, which will encrypt essentially your data migration from on-site to the cloud, as well as kind of data access events from on-site to the cloud, and as well as encrypting all your IoT devices that you currently host in the hospital to ensure that that communication of that data being stored is also transferred in encrypted state there and logged as well. With that being said, let me just quickly share my screen here. So I'll go into our Vault solution here. So this, again, is one of the things that's unique about XQ that differentiates us from existing products out there, as we provide the end client all the necessary tooling in place to encrypt and decrypt their data themselves directly on their edge device. So what this means is that none of your data or none of the patient's data ever crosses our hands at any point. All of the encryption and decryption events happen locally. The keys and policies are stored within a key store and a policy server. This key store and policy server can be hosted individually by the actual hospital themselves. So that essentially takes XQ completely out of the equation if the hospital wants to control everything, including patient data, as well as the encryption keys associated with this data. Here, doing an example, I'm going to connect as an end user to actually my S3 bucket that I have identified here on the left-hand side. One thing that you'll notice just right off the gate, you'll notice that these initial files that I have here are all kind of XQF types. These just help identify that those files are stored encrypted within that actual S3 bucket themselves. As I connect this Vault product to the actual S3 bucket, what this will do is it'll spin up a virtual file system that'll look identical to your local file system. So you can interact with data as you normally would. It's just all the encryption and decryption events are happening on the fly in the back end. Here, I'll do a simple upload. Oh, my apologies. I'll do a simple upload of a text file here. So let's say I'm uploading a patient record and I want to store this record into S3, or I'm uploading a large amount of patient data and then storing it within S3. S3 kind of provides you this redundancy that you need as a hospital to ensure that your data exists there at all times when you need to actually get a hold of it. And XQ ensures that edge encryption before data is transmitted and stored within this S3 environment. So here within this S3 bucket, you'll notice that that patient record is actually stored encrypted within S3, and then actually accessing the record So just kind of backing up here a bit, what actually happened when I uploaded this file is my local edge system encrypted the file itself directly on my laptop here that I was sitting at my desk, and then pushed this encrypted data into S3. This encrypted data is passed along with a locator token to essentially help the other system identify where to authenticate to and request access to for a specific file. Here, just accessing this file is as simple as you normally would, so you can interact with data as you typically would. So here, just accessing this patient record, I can just double click it, use all the same applications I typically would, and then make all the same edits I normally would. This data will then be re-encrypted and stored back in its destination here. With all that being said, I'll upload one more quick file here. So I'll do this revoke patient.txt as well. That will also get stored encrypted, just to show you kind of the revocation capabilities. But with all of this information is stored within a management portal. So within this management portal, you can drill down into the individual communication logs. So here, for example, that patient record X that I've just uploaded, you can tell exactly the full who, what, where, when for each individual access attempt. So you know exactly that I'm the one that accessed this record at this time, at this location. And then that data was essentially accessed by me. All of this is built with integrations in mind. So for example, if you want to create integrations between this logging system and existing SIEMs that you currently have active, that is already capable within this existing system. So you can manage and store all those logs within your existing SIEM infrastructure that you have. Secondly to that, within this management portal, you can actually manage the policies around this data. So here in the policy manager, you can create very granular policies for access of specific data items. Here, I'll do kind of a more high-level access policy. So I'll block access from Canada and the United States for the specific data, which is where I'm located. But once this policy is in place, this data is no longer decryptable from those select regions. So here, if I attempt to do exactly that same thing, so I'll attempt to actually access this hello.txt, it'll actually throw me an error that this file cannot be accessed, and I'll get an access is denied permission. This is due to my device's inability to actually request access to that specific decryption key and retrieve that back due to this specific geo restriction that I placed. I'll quickly turn this policy off and then authenticate here one more time. So this actually knocks you out completely to the authentication step if data access restriction has been put in place. So the end user will actually have to re-authenticate to be able to access data. Once you've done so, you can now, since that policy is no longer in place, I can actually access my data as I was kind of accessing before. But one additional piece of this is the remediation factor. So for example, at any point, if you've identified a threat within your system or just an unintended user is accessing your data, or even if the end patient wants to revoke access to data, if you want to give them that permission, they can go into the direct data item themselves. So let's say this revoke.txt that I've uploaded here, and they can revoke access to that specific decryption key. This does a very similar thing to policies, is it suspends access to that specific decryption key until the administrator goes in and rectifies that situation. Or secondary to that, it can completely destroy the decryption key associated with that data, rendering it essentially digital dust. So I'll do that with this file specifically. And now just trying to access that revoke patient.txt file that I just decrypted. Must have decrypted. I must have canceled the wrong one here. Let me just go back into this guy. Now, trying to access that specific file. Sorry about that. You'll notice that you'll get this error message that the data can no longer be decrypted. And that's due to my device's inability to actually request access to that specific decryption key and retrieve that back. So I can no longer decrypt the data on my edge system anymore due to that inability to access that key there. I'll quickly bounce platforms here. So that is kind of our Vault product. So that enables you edge encryption of data and the logging of access associated with data on essentially your edge systems. And then this next product ensures the encryption data migration from on-site to the cloud, or even as Hector was mentioning, a lot of systems use hybrid cloud environments. You want to secure the communication between those as well. And this enables you to do that. With this platform, is typically utilized in kind of two main vectors. So the first of which being kind of that IoT device sector. So as everyone's kind of familiar, IoT devices typically range in a wide range of manufacturers, and you want to ensure that those IoT devices have the expected level of encryption across all those devices. So the secure gateway is a lightweight software solution that can, in some cases, run on the IoT device themselves or at kind of that next step to be able to encrypt all the data being transmitted from those IoT devices directly to the AWS instance that you're currently storing those IoT data. Here I'll do kind of a simple lightweight example of that where I'll stream video traffic through a gateway. So that on the left-hand side here, I have an AWS EC2 instance set up. This is the exact same instance on top and bottom. On that EC2 instance, I have the gateway running directly on the cloud itself. And then on the bottom right, I have another secure gateway running on my MacBook that's just sitting on my desk here. So the moment I trigger this data transmission event, and I'll listen for some video traffic here, you'll notice that the secure gateway on the bottom left actually generates a unique key to encrypt that data. And then similarly on the bottom right, my device is working backwards to that. So it's requesting access to specific keys, decrypting that video traffic, and then displaying out to me. What's actually happening behind the scenes here is I have a key recycle time set to 1 second. So every 1 second, the EC2 instance is actually generating a new encryption key and then utilizing that to encrypt the next 1 second of data packet frames. So for a man-in-the-middle attack, this would be a massive amount of overhead for them to be able to grab those encrypted data packet frames, decrypt those, and then piece the whole video back together to get anything comprehensible that you can kind of see here. Secondly to that, one additional system that we've utilized this with is in data transfer events. So with EMR systems, as hospitals are kind of doing that shift from on-site to cloud, or perhaps hosting cloud read-only instances as a viable backup in case their on-site infrastructure goes down, the gateway can be utilized to encrypt the traffic that's being sent from on-site to the cloud and kind of vice versa. Doing a lightweight example of that, I'll do just a simple kind of a SFTP connection through these gateways. And the moment I essentially trigger this, you'll notice that the gateways themselves will generate unique encryption keys, even for the handshake process itself, where that handshake will be established, and then you'll create that kind of secure communication. And then additionally to that, any data pushed through this secure transfer protocol will be additionally encrypted with kind of XQ's gateway encryption. And all of these events, so all of the access events, even for the gateway themselves, will be logged back into the portal. So when you're communicating data from site to site, you can ensure that data was encrypted here and essentially sent to this site and only ever accessed at this specific site. Kind of one more item on the gateway itself is the ability to obfuscate user information when accessing web data. So here I'll do one more example here where I'll encrypt all of my web traffic going to kind of this a web proxy, which will filter out all the personally identified information. So all of my data encrypted from on-site to the cloud, which is hosted in an AWS EC2 instance, will get transferred securely using the gateway, at which point within the cloud instance, my personally identifiable data will be stripped out completely, and then my traffic will be forwarded on to essentially the end destination here. So I'll pull up kind of a simple example of that here, where I'm going to open up. So I have the gateways running here, and then I'll open up a web browser where all my data will be funneled through these two gateways. You can already see them creating keys for this information. So now, for example, when I go to Google Maps, it'll have no idea where I'm actually located. It doesn't know anything about me as an end user, as all of that data is stripped out. So I can do all the same searches I normally would. So let's say I'm looking for a hospital here. When I look for a hospital, it'll just grab me random hospitals. So here I can grab this hospital, search for a specific hospital, but I can obfuscate all my personally identifiable data. What you'll notice here is, for example, when I look at the IP address that it's identifying, it's actually associated with that EC2 instance, but all my actual IP address is stored within, is completely different from the one that the cloud is receiving. So this on the bottom is actually my IP address, whereas the one on the top is IP address of that essentially web proxy system that's hosted there with all my data being stripped out.
Great, thanks for that. And ask Hector to rejoin. So Hector, just want to get kind of your perspective. So we saw a couple of things here that I don't know if healthcare providers know that is possible in AWS. You saw everything from the bulk transfer of data from site to site, where we can lock data down. So healthcare providers have the confidence as they move data from their data center to AWS and back and forth, they have full control, and they have cryptographic control, and then they have a log of movement. We saw the patient files, individual files, each file with their own encryption key and logged separately. So this means when somebody wants to look at a file, that file has to be individually unlocked, which creates a record. We also saw, demonstrating things like IP addresses for medical apps that you might be running in AWS, where we can basically lock down or replace the patient's IP address with the AWS virtual machine address, which so it totally hides the real identity of the patient. But the important thing is the healthcare provider knows it. So if they need to log that, what's this patient really at home, they have those. So, would kind of love your thoughts on some of these capabilities and what you think they might mean for people in the healthcare industry in terms of reducing their costs or giving them new capabilities, or more importantly, thinking about AWS in a new way that, it's just not a cloud. There's a lot of value add.
Well, and it's not just a cloud. That's a great statement. If you're looking to move to the cloud just for the sake of saying you're in the cloud, that I would challenge all of us to rethink that strategy. What we're really talking about here is modern transformation with real purpose, and the real purpose being to enable healthcare organizations to better serve their patients and community. All of the things I mentioned earlier. But what's exciting about what you're doing, and as we talked earlier about zero trust principles and the need to verify, to have verified access, verified permissions, and AWS has services that do that. But when you're doing it as you move data, as you create these files, as you encrypt them, and again, you're constantly verifying that the person who's making that access request is who they are, who they say they are, where they say they are, and so on. So we're starting to really bring in that concept of zero trust. But what I look at your solution and say, now we've got zero trust data, which is a great phrase. And I love that concept and what that possibility starts to look like. Now, a few things to comment on. Read only. Read only is such a huge capability and so powerful, particularly if you're under attack or having a security event or any other incident. If you have immutable read only backups in the cloud that you can access quickly, well, you can continue to provide care to your patients. You can provide services to your members. If you're in a clinical trial, you still know who your participants are and what they're doing, what support they may need as your systems come back up, even if they're on-prem. So that whole concept of read-only, it comes at us in different shapes and forms. But what you're able to do with XQ is, it's really, I'd say, go to a least common denominator and make it easy for everybody and for all types of data. And so it is a bridge to being able to continue your work while your operational systems are brought back online, right? While you get back to what we call normal business activities. And that not only talks about being better prepared and more resilient when it comes to ransomware and ransomware responses, but again, I'd argue disasters in general. And then I love the logging aspect, the fact that I, as a patient, can see where my data is used, and as Tryon said, where, who, what, how, and so on. That's just something that we don't really have. I mean, again, some people would argue we can do it here, we can do it there, but can we really do it more holistically is the question.
Great. Well, I mean, thanks for your comments. And then I guess as a closing thought, do you have any wisdom to share with potential healthcare providers on who are considering AWS, or maybe they're already in AWS but they're not using the full tool set, about how they should develop a forward-looking strategy? And I know this is difficult because the healthcare providers are overloaded, as it were, right now, with their day-to-day. And how do they, in your opinion, is to start this journey? Kind of would love your kind of closing thought as we end this.
I think that for me, what organizations, and particularly healthcare organizations, small, medium, and large, is you're not in this alone. These challenges that are introduced in the industry, such as the recent one where Health and Human Services, or the Office of the National Coordinator, issued some guidance on patient data tracking, like location data, similar to what Tryon was showing, is that was a HIPAA privacy issue. And providers, everybody uses GPS mapping. Where's my doctor? Where's the hospital? Where can I get these services? What's the closest pharmacy? And the fact that others are tracking that data becomes a HIPAA privacy issue is a real challenge. And these are solvable problems now. And it doesn't mean that we go back and redeveloped all of these apps. It means that we start to look at concepts like zero trust data and the ability to obfuscate those IP addresses and just make it about the patient and give them the service they need without sharing their location and their search data and so on. But again, I'll repeat what I said in response to your question. The industry does not have to solve these problems on their own. There are organizations like AWS with partners like XQ with the resources in place to help them solve these challenges, and with the expertise when it comes to security, privacy, and compliance, with the investments to be able to really change the industry as a whole, to really be impactful. And I think that that's what we're waiting for. We at AWS, we use the phrase that we're customer obsessed. I'm industry obsessed. I want us to really help the industry get to that next level.
Great. And with that, I'd like to thank our online audience and encourage you, if you're interested in seeing any of this, please contact us and we will be happy to provide you a detailed briefing and live demo of zero trust data in AWS, doing everything from doing site-to-site secure file transfer, locking down patient data, and protecting very sensitive geolocation. Again, thank you for your time, and look forward to talking to everybody soon.